right. So, hold on a second. Gotta move everything around. All right. Okay. I like this chair better. The other one doesn't work very well. So this will be part 3 of my horror stories in Colombia. It was exciting as fuck, and it gave me some amazing lessons that I needed to learn. But, it was a hard lesson to learn. So after that Airbnb where everything was a bit intense, and it was a really nice respite from that intensity, that accidental Airbnb I got for the weekend, I went to a bed and breakfast. I got some more money from Fiverr, from doing graphic design stuff, and I went to a bed and breakfast in a different part of town, and I was grateful because it was also 40,000 pesos a night, and I was able to use the kitchen, and it was in a nice area of town. And it was nice to have a respite because I got enough money. I don't remember how I got the money, but I got enough money somehow. And my girlfriend would visit me there, and it was nice to have companionship. And I would do work on my laptop there, and there was a pool, and it was just, it was really cool. And I ended up at one point, because I was there for a few weeks, so I ended up at one point not having enough money again. And I was anticipating this. I'm like, hey, so I know I only booked a certain amount with you, but like I don't have much money. I really need to stay. I'm leaving on this day. Can I pay you on that day? And they're like, okay, yeah, no problem. You've paid so far, so that's fine. And that day was coming up when I was leaving to Medellín, Colombia, and the guy was like, hey, like, where's the money? And I'm like, oh, like, I'll get it to you. He's like, no, like, you need to get it to me now. Like, we're gonna kick you out. And he got really angry, and then he kind of pulled himself back because he was more of a he didn't really like to be super angry. He wasn't really an angry guy, but like understandably so, like he felt cheated. And I get that. Like if I was running a hotel and some dude was staying there, keep saying he would pay me, like I would feel cheated by him too. And he kind of pulled himself back, but like I got the picture. Like I needed to make the money. And so I'm like, well, what can I do? Like I can't just get like a graphic design job, because I'd already like reached out to everybody I knew to see if they needed a graphic design, and I got some money from some people about that. And I ended up talking to one person who gave me some money that I had already used, but he kind of cheated me out of some of that money, because I was like, I was in a desperate place, and people could kind of take advantage of me in that desperate place. So this guy ended up taking advantage of me, and I completely denounced the whole company because they were kind of fucked up. They weren't. It was all like smiles, but like when you actually talk to them deeper, there wasn't much substance to it. But I ended up figuring out like, okay, well, I have a Galaxy S8, which was the newest Samsung Galaxy phone at the time, and I also have I had a shitty backup phone that I'd brought too. It was like a T-Mobile like Samsung A5 or something. It was like a stupid, silly, shitty phone. And I'm like, okay, so I'll just use this shitty Samsung, and I'll pawn my my cell phone. So I went downtown with my cell phone. I had it all reset and everything, and I unlocked it because I had it paid off and everything. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to go from place to place to place and figure out how much I can get. And pretty quickly I found out that nobody nobody wanted to take cell phones. Like for some reason, cell phones were off limits, and probably because either they were commonly stolen or they kept getting locked. Because here in America, pawn shops don't do cell phones because the cell phones can they can be stolen and they can be remotely locked, or they can be financed. And if they're financed, that means that the person, like they'll be cut off from service. They'll be locked, activation locked, so that you can't do any, like you can't have service on them. And so most pawn shops here in America don't take cell phones. And so it must be the same in Colombia. But everyone kept saying, "Oh, it's fine. Go to this one. It's fine. Go to this one. It's fine. Just go to this one." And I ended up going to this one place, and it was the place everyone said to go to because nobody would take cell phones. And they looked at it and they're like, "Is it unlocked?" I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Okay, we'll give you 200,000 pesos for it." Or no, was it 200? I think it was like I think it was 300. I'll give you like 300,000 pesos for it. No, it was like, I think it was 200,000 pesos. I'll give you 200,000 pesos for it, which is like 70 bucks. And I'm like, I can't really beg, beggars can't be choosers. I could probably haggle with you if I was able to take a no, but you're the only person that I walked around for hours. You're the only person that'll take my cell phone. And so I was like, yeah, fine. And then he went to the back, and one of the girls that worked there, she come up to me. And this is all in Spanish, by the way. And she comes up to me. She's like, "You should ask for 250,000." And I'm like, "Yeah, I appreciate that. I didn't know I didn't have enough words in Spanish to say it, but like, I was like, yeah, thank you, I appreciate it." And because I didn't know how to say everything in Spanish that I needed to say. And he comes back, he gives me the 200,000, and I'm like, oh, that was enough for me to pay the past due rent, I guess, for the bed and breakfast, and then buy a ticket to Medellín, which I wanted to go to, and then pay for a night in a hostel there and buy some snacks. It was like, oh, I was so thankful. I was like, oh man, another break from this chaos. And so I went back to the hostel. I paid the guy, and my girlfriend came, and we went to the bus station together. And it was so sad, but also like it just felt so good to have a moment of emotion in my life. I said goodbye to her, and then I cried, and she's like, "Don't cry, you're gonna make me cry." And I'm like, "Oh." She was fucking great. She helped me retain a lot of trust in women. I grew up, I had a really crazy childhood, so I distrusted women a lot. And she helped me regain a lot of that trust, so I'm very grateful to Rosanna for that. I ended up going to Medellín, and I tried to, I had a couple nights at a hostel, but then I had to leave because I didn't have enough money, and I did the same thing. I went from hostel to hostel, asking if I could exchange my services for money. And I went online to Couchsurfing, and Couchsurfing is a place where you can, for free, you can stay at a place, and the whole idea is that they show you around town, and if I'm really proud of my town and I want to help tourists, then I show them around town, and I give them a place to stay. It's free. And this hostel was on Couchsurfing, and I talked to them, and I'm like, hey, like I do photography, videography, and graphic design. They're like, okay, no problem. Like, we need a videographer to help us get some promo materials. And so I went and I did some promo for them. I brought my camera and I recorded some stuff, and started editing it. And then what was it? I got into some argument. I think what happened was I got into an argument with the girl behind the counter for some reason, and she like got me kicked out. And I don't remember if it was an important argument or not, but she got me kicked out, and I'm like, oh fuck. So I got kicked out of that hostel, which sucked. And I got my, and I was like, okay, well, I went, and that whole day I went from place to place to place to place to place to figure out if I could exchange my services anywhere for money, and nobody was able to do that. So I was like, fuck, all right, this sucks. I'm going to have to be homeless tonight. And then this one guy, he was like, hey, can I have cash? And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. Like, honestly, I'm in your place tonight. Like, I'm also homeless, at least for the night. And he's like, oh, well, let me help you. Let me like help you figure out what to do. He's like, he had like an American accent. And I'm like, oh, like you sound have an American accent. What's going on? He's like, oh yeah, I'm from California. I'm like, oh shit, I'm from California too. And he's from like a different place in California, but he was like, he had like Colombian citizenship, but lived most of his life in California. And then he had like too many DUIs, so like they deported him or something. I don't know if that was true or whatever, but it made sense. So I'm like, okay. So he's like, yeah, like the train station is safe. You can go to the train station. You can just like sleep there because there's police there and they won't bother you. And it's also safe because there's police there. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then he's like, well, you can stay with me tonight. Like, I'll keep you safe. I know how to deal with the street here. And I'm like, okay, perfect. And so we started hanging out and it gets dark and I have all my stuff. He's like, yeah, like, you need your stuff charged. Like, you can get your stuff charged. And, like, I know this place. I'll take it to this place. It's like a mall nearby. I know the guards. They let me charge things. And I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. He's like, yeah, what do you got? I'm like, got a laptop. I got my phone. You know, just charge it up and I'll be fine. He's like, yeah, cool. And so we're hanging out and he does some card tricks. He's really, really good at the card tricks. He's really good at magic. And then he's like, hey, like, you smoke marijuana? I'm like, yeah. And so he gives me a joint. And there's like a guard behind us, like behind a fence. And he's not really bothering with us. And then there's another, like, and he keeps like saying like, hey, like, he's like, is it time yet? Like, I know when the guards change, like, I'll bring your stuff to the place and then I'll come back. And he kind of like goes there and checks and then comes back. He's like, no, not yet. I have to get the other guard to come. And he's like, no, not yet. And then we spark up a joint and I smoke a little bit. And weed makes you paranoid. Weed kind of brings out the fears in you that aren't necessarily fears that are irrational. Sometimes they are, but sometimes it just brings out the fears in you. And I'm not in a good place, of course. And I have this thought in my head. I'm like, if this guy is that good at card tricks, how do I know he's not manipulating me? Because he could easily be manipulating me if he's that good at manipulating me with card tricks. And then I'm like, well, why is he so insistent that he charges my laptop? Like, that's kind of weird. And he knows the guards, and like the guards won't bother him. So like maybe he just wants to swindle me out of my shit. And then I'm like, oh shit. And then I start to realize that I'm like, okay, let me like just leave. And I'm like, hey man, I really appreciate your help. I'm going to go find my own way tonight. And I like pick up my stuff. He's like, no, what? Like, I thought you were my friend. Like, what man? Like, what the fuck? And he like starts to like yell at me. And this is another one of the places where I'm in a mode where I'm really good at, solving, at like figuring out how do I like make myself super calm when I'm threatened. And so I'm super calm. I'm just taking my stuff and I'm walking. And again, I'd given him some clothes and I'm like, yeah, just keep the clothes I gave you. That's fine. Just like, I'm just going to leave. And I'm just walking and it's almost like, have you ever had like a small dog like bouncing around you, just barking? And it's kind of what he was like, because he was just like he was just kind of going around me, like this direction, that direction, like yelling at me. And at one point, like I look at the guard and I'm like, hey buddy, like, are you going to do anything? And he just completely ignores me. And I'm like, all right, this guy, they probably know each other. And so I just keep walking. Thankfully, he doesn't throw a punch, because again, I wasn't really trained in martial arts. But my eerily calm demeanor saved me. And I walk, and he eventually stops following. And then I sleep on a park bench, or try to sleep on a park bench. And then the next day I do work at a coffee shop, and I eat sugar packets the whole day because I have no money. That was day, I think I'm mixing up the days, to be honest. It all kind of runs together. I think that was day 2, and day 1 I was at a train station. I'm mixing up the days. I think that was day 1, and then day 2, I think it was day 2 where I'm like, all right, the guy told me about train stations. I'm going to go to this the train station, the bus terminal. And so I went to the bus terminal. And so I went to the bus terminal, and I slept in the bus terminal. And at one point, like there's one area, like if I slept on the seat, the police like they just knocked me awake whenever I would sleep. And so I found out that I could sleep like in the corner, like kind of in the shadows, and they didn't bother me. So I just kind of slept in the shadows, and I actually met a couple of guys who, like, we hung out later, like just some random other tourists. It was really, really crazy. And they thought I was cool. I was like, oh, that makes me feel good. I went on a bunch of dates in Medellín, but didn't find another girlfriend because also I wasn't staying there as long, and I don't think people wanted to, like, if you want to really get attached to somebody, you want them to stay for longer. So, but that was that. That was me being homeless in Colombia, and what that taught me was that there is a rock bottom, and this is a place I never want to go again because I was scared for my life. I was like an animal. Like every moment, I didn't know what was going to happen. I wasn't. If it rained, I was going to get wet. If somebody else told me that I couldn't be in that place, like I didn't really have much to say. I could start fighting, but then I would get arrested. Like I had zero safety from external events. Like the world was in my living room, and I was in the living room of the world. Sorry about that. My computer wasn't plugged in and it ran out of battery. But I found out that there was a consequence to not making money and not working on my finances, not working on my skills and providing value to other people. It was the wake-up call that I couldn't be spoiled anymore. It still took me several years to figure out how to not be spoiled, how to get a sense of responsibility and of self-respect and of earning my own keep. I had to learn that over the next several years. And but it was an amazing experience that gave me a clear point to focus on when I'm like, this is why you can't live with a sense of entitlement. And by a sense of entitlement, I don't mean like feeling like you're deserving of something and feeling like you're worthy of it, because that's a good sense of entitlement. I mean like feeling like everybody should give it to you no matter what you do, and you don't have to work for anything or put in any effort. That is a negative sense of entitlement. That's usually what you think of when you think of a spoiled rich kid. That's kind of how I was. So without this experience, I would have to, I don't know what would have happened. I would have had another kind of rock bottom of some sort. But this was my rock bottom. And in the next episode, I'm going to talk to you about the good parts of Colombia, and then on the next one. Actually, you know what? I'm going to switch those around. I know in the last video I said I'm going to talk about the good parts of Colombia, and then I'm going to talk about the other stuff. But now what's going to happen, I'm going to switch those around because I think it would be better to follow this up with how to get yourself out of a spoiled mindset, and then in the video afterwards, I'll talk about the good parts of Colombia and how amazing it was to be there. So I wish you guys the best. Subscribe if you want to, and I'm excited to talk to you about the next stuff.